recapitulation or overall basic understanding, I will like to make some observations from which may help us in coming to some of our own ideas about what ethics and other things should be formulated as our own guideline and as a part of the as a point for the social campaigns in our own countries. But one thing which is very painfully obvious all over South Asia, most of the countries from where friends are here, is that there is communalism in some form or the other. Now, of course, the expression is different. In Bangladesh, it will be different. In India, it is different. In India, of course, I'll be focusing more on India, where because since last 3 months, a new political dispensation has come up, and that particular organization has, of course, started creating a lot of things. But when I mean by communalism, basically, obviously, we all know that it is a sort of a abuse of political identity, abuse of religious identity for political goals. Abuse of religious identity for political goals. And in that, what becomes most obvious is not the agenda of the communal politics. What we are basically discussing so far is the superficial part of the phenomenon of communalism. I think the mic is not behaving well.
I think this is fine. It was echoing earlier.
Okay.
Yeah,
because
we can hear you fine.
Yeah. So actually what we have been focusing on is just a small part of the phenomenon of communalism, and that is the superficially visible part, and that is what communal violence is. Most of our things, and why the journalism and other things come into it, because communal violence has a multi-layered anatomy. Multi-layered anatomy, when I say, of course, I will not go too much into the details of the colonial history, the way our histories were communalized, presented in a religious color, but also that there were some organizations which picked up this communal version of history. Now there are 2 or 3 things. Communal version of history was picked up by the communal streams when I talk in India. On one hand, Hindu Mahasabha, RSS, on the other side, Muslim League. They picked up the communal interpretation of history in which kings were identified by their religion. Now it is another matter that kings were kings, religion was incidental to them. But in this presentation, I mean, that is the root of it, from where the hatred against the other community started being propagated. Now, the communal violence which picked up during the colonial period, initially the communal violence, the issues were more related to cow, beef, pig, music in front of a mosque and other things. And the mechanism for this was not much through media. The mechanism of this was much through the word of mouth propaganda, in which our RSS is very adept, because they have devised many mechanisms of spreading rumors, spreading what they want to convey through these mechanisms. Now it is especially after 1980 that the role of media became very visible in constructing the communal violence. Because I am very sure that communal violence is not a spontaneous phenomenon. It is never a spontaneous phenomenon. It is definitely orchestrated under some design. And in that design, the particular organization, like my friend Irfan Engineer, he has analyzed around 32 inquiry commission reports. Now, most of these inquiry commission reports point out that at the root of this communal violence, some organization, of course I am talking about India, there is some organization which is remotely, distantly, closely connected with RSS, that Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, whose Pracharak is ruling our country at the moment. So that was one. Secondly, that the whole mechanism is that at the root in the society, there are many prejudices, biases against the minority community. And if I had to focus in India, then these biases, prejudices, myths, stereotypes are more against Muslims and Christians, right? And these have been there from quite a bit of time. Against Muslims from last, say, more than a century. Against Christians, they have been intensified, especially after the decade of 1980s, right? And so the basic level, there are prejudices, biases, myths against these religious minorities. Now then comes a new terminology of ethnopreneur. Now this terminology I am picking up from Deepankar Gupta, and he is combining two words. One is ethnicity, second is enterprise. Right? So there is a politician who sees that there is a chance of enhancing his political power. So he spreads particular type of he creates a mechanism, he creates some sort of a pretext, or he creates some sort of a situation whereby violence is orchestrated. And two well-known examples, of course, if we take one of Gujarat, where Godhra was used as a pretext. Another is this Kandhamal, where murder of Swami Lakshananand was done. And from here onwards, the role of media becomes much more intense. I must say, as such also during non-violence phase, which is becoming very rare in India. Earlier, of course, we all remember big violence, anti-Sikh violence, Mumbai violence, Surat violence. Now, of course, the latest trend is that no big violence, small violence going on here and there, and dividing the community in this thing. Now, once this violence starts, so number one, in media also, the presentation of the events is such that the biases become stronger. I'll give one very interesting example which some of you may be knowing or not. And here there is no wrong reporting. It is the facts which get reported, but the way media highlights itself intensifies the biases. So I'm now trying to point out that the correct reporting is being done, but the way things are presented in the papers. One example I'll give you. You must be knowing that recently in India, many acts of terror took place. Right? Here, Malegaon, then Ajmer, and different places. When the violence took place, immediately next day in the papers, there is a banner headline on the front page that there is a violence. 6 terrorists have been caught. All of them are Muslims. All of them are merely carrying their identity card and all identities, so that police's job is easier. That is in my sentence, right? So that comes right the next day. 6 months later, most of them get released from the jail. Now that which was a banner headline the next day, that comes on the page 6 or 8 in a smaller corner. So here journalist is not doing anything wrong. Both are correct reportings, but the way the things are presented, it definitely intensifies the things. Now secondly, like we know that at the time of Gujarat violence, whatever Modi did and his role, there are 2 Gujarati papers which heightened his role by presenting the events in a particular way. And because of those language press, what we say earlier, we used to say that language press, what we call non-English press, is generally called language press. That is more communal than the English medium. That was the thing we used to say about 1980. Of course, now the things are changing. And these media, the way reporting is done, that definitely creates a divide amongst the people. Now, second thing I want to say, that the violence, when it is orchestrated, right, the immediate news is very important. And that time, the journalists are not exercising their caution in cross-checking the facts. For example, let's take this Godhra train burning. Now, Godhra train burning, it took place. Immediately it was reported that it is what Modi stated, that it is an act of terrorism, then Muslims are involved, ISI is involved, international terrorism is involved. The way it was presented, everybody instantly falls for it. And even the most reasoned person, if they try to analyze right on that day, they can find out that this is totally wrong. But by the time your voice of sanity and reason you can reach, already the game is over and thousands of people get killed during that particular period. So my point is that when we are discussing these things, number one, can we also focus on the way journalist mindset is there in the society? Because such news, I mean, if we have a sort of a training of journalists in rational historiography, in sensitivity, in other things, of course this is a tall order. When the whole society has communal way of thinking, is it possible that we have journalists who can go beyond the obvious, beyond the immediacy, and think about the real truth before propagating it. But I think without that, we may have clauses, but if the mindset of the majority of the media, majority of the people remains communal, it will be very difficult to exercise caution in spreading this type of a news. And once this news comes, people's like a silent social sanction, like Noam Chomsky uses the word manufacturing consent for doing some particular action. Here, because of this type of a reporting, is sort of a silent social sanction of the broader layers of society comes in, whereby the violence can go on. Otherwise, it is unbelievable that how can innocent Christians or innocent Muslims can be killed day in and day out on the pretext of either Godhra train burning or murder of Swami Lakshmanananda. Because broader layers of society come to believe that yes, Lakshmanananda has been killed in collusion with certain people. Yes, Godhra train has been burned. So I think we may also, when we are talking about this, if we want to think of a real control of this problem, we, while on one hand have to develop ethics and other norms for the reporting, we also have to think of the mindset which goes into writing this sort of news. So point is this silent social sanction, in creation of this silent social sanction, it may be the TV medium or it may be the print medium, both are playing their role very negatively and very strongly. And the third point, to add much discomfort to the whole thing which is happening, is the new things called that mobile, social media, Twitter and all that. Like Muzaffarnagar violence took place only because that video from Pakistan where two thieves are being killed by a Muslim mob, that gets presented as if two Hindu boys are being killed by the Muslim mob in Muzaffarnagar, and that was a triggering point. So this is third thing. This, I think, I don't know whether this falls in our purview or not, but the abuse of social media, Twitter and others, which is now becoming a stronger tool for instigating and spreading violence. Now I think that's what also we have to see. Now, fourth point which I want to point out here, that there are some things currently I'm very disturbed about, and one of the things is the way Ram Temple campaign was used to divide the society. Currently, a so-called non-existent phenomenon which is being presented as the real threat to the society, and that of love jihad. Now, initially we were ignoring it, but by and large, a large section of media is uncritically carrying it without investing it. I was shocked to see when I was coming here. Before that, I saw one magazine, which is actually, I should not be seeing that magazine. That should be actually closed, but it is still open. I hope you got that magazine. And that open magazine carries 5 case stories picked up from here and there, how Hindu girls were lured, how they were converted into Islam, and how painful life they are leading. So this type of many magazines. Now this again, of course, probably may be beyond the control of the journalists themselves, whether they are doing the bidding of their owners and the bigger owners. That may be whether earlier there were some laws which thought of the autonomy of the media. Now with like in India, Reliance and others who are the close people of communal forces, if they are owning the media, whether journalists on their own can, how much independence they can exercise and how much they can do, whether we can think of this. Because I do believe that in whole of this communal process, media has a very powerful role to play. It can play a positive role, but unfortunately today in India, it is by and large part of playing a totally negative role. And that, in addition, when we are thinking of these things, I strongly feel that we, on one hand, campaign to the international agencies, campaign to the national agencies about the type of ethics and norms which should be there, followed by the journalists. On the second hand, my appeal is that we should also think of promoting rational historiography, promoting a rational way of empathetic looking at the other religious minorities, freedom of religion and other things, we have to promote these values amongst the journalist fraternity. And that's why I was talking to Tahmina in the morning, that we did this experiment that in Mumbai we tried to organize a one-day workshop for journalism students, young journalists and all that, so that we can give this sort of a values to them. Because today what is happening, earlier after the Gujarat violence, I had the chance of addressing journalism students once, twice and thrice. So I don't know what effect that had, but surely it has a powerful impact on the way these people are going to write their pieces and present the social truth in a particular way. Now that is one part. Secondly, I don't know in other countries, but in India there is something called Press Council of India, about which I think John and my friend Manoj will be able to tell better. But even Press Council of India, one of the members was once telling me that not many people are representing to them. How can they do it themselves and all that? Whether suo moto they can do it, whether we can appeal to, we can come to one of the points in our ethics that there is a need for press councils which is broadly representative, which has a good deal of representation from religious minorities and the weaker sections of society, and which also on its own tries to keep a tab, tries to keep monitor the way things are being reported. So I think these 2 points, I don't have much to say on this, since already lot of advanced discussions have already taken place. But these 2 points I will request that whether there can be till press councils which are maybe from the top, whether we can also think of the bodies of journalists come aware citizens, which do this sort of a work of press council. Because press council, again, obviously what they do, what we don't know, but whether we can have a parallel social structure. This parallel social structure is comprising of different deprived sections, religious minorities and sensitive individuals about it, and they on their own do a strong monitoring work and try to reach it to the different sections. At the moment I have a feeling that even this press council and others, they are not being very effective, because the people who should be complaining to them, people who should be taking each and every case to them, are not that active. Like in courts, like unless you go, generally the judgments don't come. In press council, I have a feeling, I am not very sure about it, but we need to have our community organizations, social organizations, which undertake this job of monitoring. And lastly, if we can think of bodies which can preempt this spread of wildfire which takes place either through mobile or Twitter, or the events as they took place in Gujarat and other places, whether we can think of some sort of a platform of social secular activists who are very vigilant about it, and as soon as these things come up, they take it to the appropriate bodies and make a positive intervention. This also means that we also have to have a sort of a alliance with social organizations working for religious freedom, organizations working against caste and gender inequality, that how do we sort of create our own media structures, if not through that powerful TV or print media, at least the parallel media of social and other things probably we can think of. So these are some of the suggestions, and because I am not that technical about this I am throwing to the floor, so that tomorrow when we finally